In the last section, we went through two very quick diagrams just to give you a taste of how clustering works. We're now going to flip back over to our index.js file and implement clustering inside of our Tiny Express application. All right, so back over here. We're going to first get started off by requiring in the cluster module at the very top of the file. Again, remember, this is one of the Node standard library modules, just the same as FS or crypto or any of those other ones. So I'm going to say const cluster is require cluster. The library right here has a couple of different properties and functions assigned to it that are going to be absolutely indispensable for us to set up our clustering process here. The first thing I want to do, just to show you the first property and possibly one of the most important ones that we're going to need to get access to, is a property called isMaster. So I'm going to add a console log right here. I'm going to say cluster.isMaster. I'm then going to save this file, and then I'm going to go restart my server inside the terminal and see what the result of this console log is. All right, so here is my running server. I'm going to kill it with Control-C, and I'll start the server back up with node index.js. And when I do, you'll immediately see that I get a console log result of true right here. So remember how we said just a second ago that when we first execute node.js, Node executes the contents of that file and then starts up a copy of Node that we refer to as the cluster manager. The cluster manager has that isManager property always set to true. As soon as we start forking off additional worker instances, however, that isManager flag is going to be set to false. So for cluster manager right here, we have isManager set to true. For all the worker instances, we have isManager set to false. And we basically use that single property, this single property right here, to decide what the file, what this index.js file should do whenever it gets executed. Because remember, as soon as we start doing the fork, Node is going to execute that index.js file a second or third or fourth time. So when we run this file, we need to make sure that we behave slightly differently depending upon whether we are running in the cluster manager or a worker instance. So to give you a very practical example of how we're going to do that, we're going to remove the console log right here, and we're going to replace it with a little bit different code. So I'm going to say if cluster.isMaster, and I'm going to open up an if statement, and then I'm also going to add on an else statement. So here's my opening curly brace right here, and I'm going to put all of my server related code into this else case. So I'm going to highlight all the stuff right here. I'm going to indent it in, and then I'm going to close off that else statement with a curly brace at the very bottom, like so. And then I'll save the file. Now at present, whenever we run this index.js file, we don't have a case for what to do if we are currently executing this file in the master mode. So I'm going to add in one little instruction to this thing. I'm going to say cluster.fork, like so. Okay, so let's take a pause right here for just a second, and I don't mean like a break. I want to add in just a comment or two to this file to very clearly describe what is happening when we execute this file with node index.js at the command line. So the very first time that we execute this file at the command line, we're going to ask the question, is the file being executed in master mode? And if it is, then we're going to enter this if statement right here, and we're going to call cluster.fork. That's going to cause index.js to be executed again, but in slave mode. And rather than slave mode, a better term here might be like child mode, like so. If the file is being executed not in master mode, so if we are a child, then we're not going to try to fork anything, and instead we're going to enter the else case. So in that else case, I'm going to add a comment that says, I'm a child, I'm going to act like a server and do nothing else. So that's pretty much it. Now every time we call cluster.fork, isMaster will be set to false, so we enter the else case right here, and all of our child instances behave like a normal Express server. Now, before we move on, let's flip over to our terminal very quickly. I want to restart our server and test it out and just make sure that everything is still working the way we expect. So I'm going to go back over to my terminal. I'm going to kill the running server. I'm going to start it back up with node index.js. And I should be able to go back over to localhost 3000, refresh the page, and then after a 5-second wait, because remember we still have that pause in there, I should see the page refresh again. Very good. Okay, so we set up a cluster, but as far as I can tell, it's not really doing a whole lot for us. So let's come back in the next video, and we're going to start to massage the code in here just a little bit to make it much more useful than it is right now. So I'll see you in just a minute.